Got it. Okay. Lovely to meet everyone. I think I might have met some of you, but really, really great to reconnect. I'm actually dialing in now from Philadelphia. I was meant to be in Mexico City, but now I'm flying tomorrow. So only 8:30, not too early. Where is most of everyone dialing in from? Are most of you in Accra, or are you split between, I think, Accra, Nairobi? Where is everyone? Accra. Yeah, you can just use the chat. I think that for the purpose of this call, feel free to use the chat function the whole call. Oh, Abuja, I haven't been there in a long time. Amazing. Well, all right, love it. So lots of Ghana, Nigeria, my old stomping grounds. Amazing. Well, guys, I'm so excited to be here today. This is my second time speaking to this group, though I imagine there are many, many new faces. The last time I spoke, I was still the head of marketing for Uber in Sub-Saharan Africa, where I spent 7 years. I launched Uber in South Africa in 2013. I then became the head of marketing for South Africa, followed by head of marketing and growth for Sub-Saharan Africa. So I onboarded our very first rider in South Africa. And then, 7 years later, we had launched in Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya. So I know the Sub-Saharan Africa region very, very well. I scaled the business to millions. We get an amazing team, scaled the business to millions of trips a week with hundreds of thousands of drivers prior to when I left just before COVID. So I had the opportunity to really see Uber from its early days through to, the business that we became, obviously based in Sub-Saharan Africa, but my team sat between Sub-Saharan Africa and the Netherlands. And I also did quite a bit of travel to San Francisco. So I was part of that journey. Since leaving Uber, I've actually gone ahead and founded my own venture. So I I relate to many of you on this call. And I think that the first call, I had a full PR team behind me who made really pretty slides for this. Now I am a founder, and like many of you, have no PR team and no time. So you are going to get more of a free flowing dialogue today, but I promise I've made it super interesting. And thank you. What I would say is, guys, feel free to use this meeting chat and kind of like jump in or raise your hand. We can keep this like pretty casual, but I'll also leave time at the end for questions specifically. But yes, I'm sure everyone on this call can relate to not having time to make beautiful slides. So we are going to just kick it off. But yeah, so I left Uber just before COVID, and so much of my Uber career was spent across different continents and really building out these businesses in different ways with teams from all over the world and majority remotely out of offices. And so I became very, very passionate about this intersection of how we work, play, live, and travel. And it was during COVID, actually, just when COVID kicked off, I left Uber, and all these companies were reaching out to me to advise them on hybrid structures and remote teams. And everyone was very focused on the software solution. Whereas I looked at myself, I joined Uber again 10 years ago, 10 and a half years ago, I joined Uber in my early 20s. And my entire career, all of my growth was built off of learning in person, of using this travel, these cultural moments actually to my benefit, of working in different offices, meeting new teams. And there was this big experiential piece that I felt was missing from the future of work. And so I founded Yayem. Yayem is actually, it's a village in Senegal, what inspired the name, that I spent a lot of time in when I was living in West Africa. And Yayem is a global digital membership that unlocks access to people, places, and experiences in global cities that really make the world feel limitless and like home. So we, in practice, it means that you have one membership that gives you access globally to different workspaces, to amazing experiences with different founders, to a global concierge that facilitates everything from recommendations to introductions. So it's really an all-in-one solution for the new way that so many of us as founders, as entrepreneurs, as senior employees are operating. It looks like Alfred might be struggling with his audio. I just see the chat. So that's my new business. I launched a year and a half ago in Portugal. I've since expanded to Mexico City. I launched London in December. We actually launched Cape Town this last month. And this year we're going to be expanding across Africa, hopefully with Accra as our hub for West Africa. So really excited about, West Africa for me is, I consider it one of my homes. And I'm excited to bring my business there and hopefully welcome all of you guys as some of our founding members. So that's a little bit on Yayem. And obviously we can, chat more on that later. But tips and tricks for new market marketing strategies. So again, probably because of where I'm also in this stage as a founder, I made this call much more about like new market entry. And so kind of the early days of launching your product in a new market. I did a little bit of research on who would be on the call, and I felt that that was going to be a more relevant call than talking about some of the later stage paid marketing, high budget initiatives. But I also have a lot of background in that. So if you want to talk more on that specifically, we can, again, I don't think I'll take up the full hour at all. So we'll leave time at the end for any questions you guys have, and feel free to ask questions that are more about like bigger marketing campaigns if any of you guys are in that stage of your business. So what I've done here is I've put together a list of kind of 10 tips and tricks that I personally live by when launching any new product in a new market. I followed this when I was at Uber, and it's what I'm replicating at Yayem. I'll run through the 10, dive into them, and then after this email, I can also follow up with just this list of 10 so you guys have them relevant. So first one for me, which I really live by and always try to tell my founders that I advise and my team to live by. What gets you from 0 to 1,000 users is very, very different from what's going to get you to over 1,000 users. And I really can't emphasize this enough. We're all smart people. It's so easy to be tempted to kind of look at what Facebook's doing, what's Airbnb doing, and try to replicate that. You don't need to do that. And likely you will fail if that's how you tackle it. You need to think scrappy. Honestly, at Uber, I would stand at airports waiting for people who needed a taxi, run up to them and convince them to use Uber, which I downloaded for them. So they didn't even download the app. It was just to get people to realize that something like Uber actually existed. I would then leave and knock on the doors of chauffeurs who were waiting outside to pick up riders. And if they had, a 2-hour gap between their trips, I'd convince them, I'd get in the car and convince them to test out an Uber trip. None of that, is what you're going to do post 1,000 users in a new market. But to get to 1,000 users, be scrappy. Call your friends and family, tap into your alumni networks, just get people to give you a chance. Similar to this brings me to number 2. But again, I really can't emphasize it enough. Don't be afraid to do things that will not scale. I hear founders and teams all the time talking about scale, and investors and VCs. Scale, 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 scale. We all get it. We all want to build multi-billion-dollar companies. And yes, you need to crack scale to do that. But when you're still finding product market fit, you really don't need to worry about scale. And actually, I think it can be a really big distraction and also keep you from trying things that could lead to like major, major breakthroughs. Again, this goes hand in hand with the first one that I said, but when we were launching Uber, I would literally go around handing out promo cards and talking to anyone that would talk to me. I think Airbnb is the one who like famously would redirect Craigslist bookings to their website, right? Like that's probably not even legal. I don't know, but like that clearly isn't a scalable solution to building a multi-billion-dollar company. But that's what they did to first get people trialing Airbnb. I think again, if I look at Yayem today, if I look at Monday, I have 3 20-minute calls with prospective members who have applied, right? Clearly the founder taking calls like that, not scalable. But right now I'm looking to get to 1,000 users. We're at about 300 users around the world right now. It's a more premium product. So it's a higher price point. We're not looking for millions of users, but we're not 1,000 users, right? So it's okay for me as the founder to take time and have those conversations. Third one I would say here is don't invest in paid marketing or fancy tools until you are at a growth stage. Guys, I really can't emphasize this one enough. We're in this crazy digital world, right? It's different from when I launched Uber 10 years ago. Hi. Can everyone hear me, by the way? Yes. Okay, great. Yeah, there's no presentation. So don't worry. You guys just get me, but I'll follow up with an email. This is a big one, which is on paid marketing and like fancy tools in general. The easiest way to burn through whatever investment you have raised is through paid marketing. Well, and other things as well, but way too many people look to tackle their initial growth and immediately want to start doing paid ads until you have a really strong funnel, super strong content. You really are just going to burn your money. So I would really, really advise against investing too much. You can always test. I'm always a fan of testing, but until you have super optimized content, click-throughs, funnel, re-engagement, segmentation, it is so hard. I mean, if you look at how much money companies that actually have all of that still waste on paid, it's astronomical. We all just see the sexy side, right? Like we see the Instagram ads and think, oh, they did it. Why can't I? it's extremely, extremely hard to nail and to not contribute to massive wastage in the beginning. Similarly, I would say like avoid fancy marketing tools in the beginning as well. Like, I mean, I say this, I invested like 30K in the last year in a marketing tool that we should have just been doing our own emails. It didn't give us that value at all. So I still, despite a lot of experience in this, continue to make these mistakes because they're easy to make, but really focus on like keeping things low cost, learning, keeping things scrappy. It's really, really easy to waste money when you start investing in high spend marketing tools and channels, and it's just not the right stage when you're small. What should you invest in then? So one, I am a massive fan of referrals. So investing in referrals early on. We were getting about 75% of our new members from referrals when we launched Uber. My biggest focus right now with our existing members is cracking referrals with them. I haven't done it yet, but it's a huge priority. Your early members or, your early customers, whether it's B2B or B2C, are who are going to get you to your next stage of growth. So do not take them for granted. Get them excited. If they're motivated by getting something back, figure out what that motivation is. Uber was easy. It was some discounted rides. Yayem, I'm trying to figure out what that value is, but there is nothing more valuable than your earliest supporters, and figuring out how you can like gamify that, get them excited. You don't need a fancy product, right? Like, again, I say this, I've made the same mistakes many times over. You were like, okay, but I need referrals. I need to do this. I need a coin. I needed this. You just need to be able to email someone. Here's how you refer. Here's how you tell your friends, and let them know, follow that human life cycle. Let them know like, hey, I saw you referred. Thank you. Let's get your feedback, right? There's such a human component in the beginning that we often overlook because we're just so busy. But referrals are massive and can really get you to that, can just crack through your first stage of growth if done in the right way. Second, my second favorite, I'd say, are local partnerships. So again, it's so interesting. Like, we're living in such a digital age today that I think that I sound like some like baby boomer as I speak about this, but like, I think that if you look today at just like what exists, it really is so different than 10 years ago. I mean, with like TikTok, with new platforms, we live in a digital world, and it's so important to crack that. But at the same time, I am a true believer that like in the early days, being scrappy, doing what you can do for free, for cheap through partnership is critical. And again, I think so many companies today are just sitting there focusing purely on the digital, which is important, especially for tech companies, of course. But going out there and pitching to a local partner about why they should give you a shot is so valuable in the early days. And the other thing I would say is like, find out what motivates partners, right? So like, this is like, it's psychology 101 that I think so many people miss because we are living in this like crazy digital world. Sit down with a partner and just be like, hey, this is what I'm doing. I want to know about you. What gets you excited? Right? Like, figure out how you can position your product to that partner and get them excited. So much value in getting early partners and early advocates. And this goes to my second bit. So my three favorite things early on for marketing are referrals, smart partnerships, and non-traditional influencers. So influencers today suck. I think that 10 years ago, when we were looking at influencers, it was a totally different world, right? Today, you have people who have literally built careers on being influencers. And as a result, like, when you're scrappy and you're early, you pitching to a, follower in Lagos with, I don't know, 600,000 followers is just, you're kind of setting yourself up in many cases for failure, right? Like, you're not going to be able to afford them. They're going to be so inundated with requests that they're not really going to be able to do anything for you. And it ends up just being a waste of time and money. I would look at who are the non-traditional influencers. So, not the TikTok star with, again, millions of followers, but I don't know, depending on what your product is, maybe it's the head of alumni networks for whatever, product managers at UCT. Again, totally depends on your product, but there's so much value in early advocates, and so many people get this wrong. Like, people spend so much time and energy on who they think is the biggest following, which is great at a certain point and for certain products, but really thinking about who should be the one promoting your brand and going up to people who will really value what you have to offer is so much more valuable than getting, the same influencer that everyone is trying to get, which will just waste your time, waste your money, and most likely you won't get anything out of it. My number 7 tip and trick would be, don't underestimate the power of junior marketers. So this is another one. I have so many founders. So in addition to founding Yayem, I also advise different startups around the world. I will often get asked, hey, can you vet the CMO candidate? And this company, companies will ask me when they're earning, they haven't even broke like $100,000 ARR. They have really, really little traction to show. And they'll say they want to hire a CMO. I'm like, what, it's just, in my view, not the right move. I think that you need smart founders in the early days and you need great executors, in my experience. I mean, I am a CMO and I'm struggling because I don't have enough executors on my team, right? So this is a mistake I see people make all the time when it comes to marketing. They want to hire the strategist, the CMO, the sexy this. They spend a lot of money on this hire, and yet they still don't have that person who's just going out and selling and hustling. Time and time again, I see founders make this mistake. So it's not to say, look, if you're like a technical founder and you really need someone on the CMO side, awesome, totally different. I'd say this is when you have a founder who is a marketing-esque founder, who has those skill sets and then hires the CMO when they really need people who are just going out and selling. So I'd really be mindful of making that same kind of mistake. Number 8, be data-driven, but don't overdo it. And this is like, this is a really big one. Again, it's a mistake that I see founders make all the time, and one that frankly I make myself. Data integrity is key. You can't experiment and learn if you have shitty data. Sorry, but it's true. At the same time, you can get stuck in the early days in such a data rabbit hole. And I've also seen companies do this. And for whatever reason, it's just so hard to crack the right balance. Like, I think even if you look at Uber was always in a data rabbit hole, tracking every single thing that frankly was a time waste. Then you have the other end of it, which are like the non-data founders who will just like not look at data, and it really bites you. So having poor data is so expensive to fix, so time consuming. But at the same time, when you're an early founder and are entering a new market, you don't need 45 metrics that you're trafficking week over week. Likely you won't see much fluctuation. Half the time they just depress you if you're looking at it too frequently. And you don't even know the right metrics necessarily to be looking at when you go to that granular level. So finding that right balance between not looking at the data and going psycho on the data is just critical. What I always say is like, what are your North Star metrics that you really need to know and that everyone on your team should know? And again, I think this is looking at like where sometimes I probably lean on the side of like not enough data at times. And it's like, if I look at Uber, where Uber was great, is like every single person on the team in the beginning knew how many trips a week you were doing, how many signups on the member side you got, what were some of the critical efficiency calculations. So if a driver was online, how much of that were they actually optimized on a trip, right? So Uber was really, really good at picking what were the core metrics to look at. That said, they had a lot of other metrics that took up a lot of time, but everyone knew those core metrics. So I would ask yourselves, like, what are those 3 core metrics that every single person in the room should know? And really focus on 100% data integrity around those metrics. I think that is probably my advice on the best way to look at data when you're early days in a market. Number 9, everyone on the team needs to be a salesman or woman. Also can't emphasize this one enough. Truly, the difference between a company in the early days that makes or breaks it can be about just ownership on the team. And like, it's so interesting. Like, again, if I look at my own numbers, I mean, I'm in an interesting position because I did the Uber thing and now I'm a founder. Like, I still look at my growth numbers and so much of it's just coming from me, right? Which is like, for me, I'm like, okay, I need to make sure that my whole team is selling. That's too much of an imbalance, but it just shows what that sell can do for your business. And if you can build a team where everyone is selling like the founder, you will break through your initial stages of growth like that. Again, I can learn from my own errors on my own team, right? Like, had everyone been selling like I was right now, we would have already had our Series A, And so figuring out who are those sales men and women, getting people on your team who like aren't a little bit, you need people who are down to just like get rejected also. Go out there, sell, like put their own egos aside. It's a really hard one. And I actually feel like it's getting harder. I think maybe because now everyone has has a brand and has this like digital personality that I find, at least in my own hiring, a little bit harder to crack that. But when you crack it, and it pays off, I mean, astronomically. So like, if you feel like your team are not owners and you are the only one selling, massive red flag, and will cost you so much money. Again, I will learn from my own mistakes here. I wasted so much money in my first year of operations by just keeping on people because I was like, oh, but replacing them is going to be so time consuming. should have replaced them from day one. So take my advice, go through your core team. If people aren't owning it, shake things up. It's probably the most important thing, I would say, early days. And then finally, number 10, and then I'll just to bring it all together, I'll go through the 10 list again. Number 10 is that you need to, as founders, just lead with mental fortitude and resilience. You are going to get rejected so many times, and things are going to fail, and you are going to try things and be excited and invest in it, and it's going to blow up. The most important thing in the early days with launching in new markets is just having that resilience. Again, the amount of times I get rejected all the time. If I took that personally and let that get me down, I'd be nowhere. So know that you're not in this alone. I also think that every founder shares I hate LinkedIn because you just go on LinkedIn and it's every founder sharing their amazing story, or it's so curated that it just doesn't actually feel authentic. Being a founder is so hard. Again, I have almost 10 years at one of a unicorn behind me, and I'm still making errors that first-time founders make. So go out there, lead with resilience, show vulnerability to your team, but learn and learn fast. It is the most critical thing. If building a business was easy, everyone would do it. It's really hard. We're also operating in a very challenging macro climate. So don't be too hard on yourselves, but learn, try things, be resilient. And again, surround yourself with a team who shares in that. So before I kind of break for questions, I know, it wasn't ideal not having these written out. Apologies again. Hopefully next time I chat with you, I have a fancy PR team who can build amazing slides for me for these kinds of sessions. But just to recap, these are my 10 tips and tricks for new market marketing strategies, from an early marketing executive at Uber to a first-time founder. And like I said, they apply to both different times in my life and career. Number one, what gets you from 0 to 1,000 users is different from what will get you to over 1,000 users. Number two, do not be afraid to do things that will not scale. Number three, don't invest in paid marketing or fancy tools until you have cracked product market fit. Number four, invest in referrals and your early users from the start. Number five, identify and partner with super smart local partnerships. They will be your biggest brand ambassadors. Number six, target the non-traditional influencer. Don't spend your time and energy on the 600K plus TikTok star who is going to be approached by every brand and have really high expectations and not have that much time. Look for the influencer who has genuine influence within your product space and has access to your segment audience, your audience segmentation. Number seven, don't underestimate the power of junior marketers. Number eight, find the right balance when it comes to data. Be data-driven, but don't overdo it. Less is more, but ensure data integrity. Number nine, you need to hire a team of sales men and women. You as the founder cannot be the only one selling your product and the only one who has that owner mindset. And number 10, leading with mental fortitude and resilience. You are going to get rejected all the time. Things are going to flop. Fall fast, fall forward, and learn. So those are my 10 tips and tricks to new market marketing strategies. I hope that despite having no fancy presentation, that was helpful for this group. Like I said, I can follow up with that list of 10. Honestly, my slides would have just been me putting that list of 10 with random photos around it. So I hope that you understand why I deprioritized that as a founder. The other thing I would say is time efficiency is critical. But I hope that was useful, guys. And if it's okay, I would love to now really just open up the floor just for conversation, questions, anything that I might not have gotten to that you'd love to learn more about. No questions.
Thank you very much, Lindsey, for a beautiful presentation without a deck. It was very, very insightful and informative. So right now, there are room for questions. So if you have any question or comments or suggestion, kindly raise your hand, and then you have the go ahead to answer or provide. And you can use the chat box if you want to type in your questions. So.
Hi, Lindsey. Thanks so much. I think I'll just get the ball rolling. I mean, you said so many interesting things here. I guess I want to start with just the conversation around just influencers, because I think that's something that I hear a lot about. Like almost every marketing campaign has a bit that's really centered around the use of influencers. How would you, and I totally agree with you, right? Because I think that just cutting through the noise is even more important, especially when you're dealing with these, in quote unquote influencers. So what are just some tips on really honing in on who the key, I would say, decision drivers are, right, within your industry? And what's the best way of getting in touch with them, striking a deal that's mutually beneficial?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would first look at who is your audience. So I think that's the number one most important thing is who's your audience. And you might be in the early days and not have perfect segmentation. That's normal. But really step one of that would be defining like who is it that you want to be speaking to. Step two would be who's speaking to them. So really thinking about who is going to have regular interactions with them. And frankly, I mean, you can look at influencers and partnerships almost in the same way, right? It's what is the individual or brand? And again, today we're in a world where individuals are brands. What are the brands that are reaching them in a meaningful way? That's important as well, meaningful, right? Because that's going to make or break whether or not this is effective, whether or not it's a meaningful interaction. And do they have trust? So meaningful interaction and trust are critical. So again, just to reinforce that, it's number one, who is your own audience? Which again, like we all have to take a step back still. I think I do it all the time and really drive down. I just did again a new segmentation this week just to make sure I have the best understanding of who my user is. Again, number two, who's speaking with them? And then number three, that's when you should start to think about like what is something that would be valuable to that brand. And how can you position something that is appealing to this influencer or this company in a meaningful way. So, I mean, look, if I look at Yayem, right, because it's what I'm doing now, and it's more relevant than kind of Uber is just for this conversation. I'm looking at who's talking to if I look at my two segments that I'm targeting are either what I call one, like these hybrid workers, which many of you guys might fall into. It's oftentimes founders, tech executives. They might have an office, but they're oftentimes working from an office, from a coffee shop, from a home. They might have, in most cases, a designated base, but they're also quite global and or aspire to be global. My second segment is what I call like champagne nomads, which are this new age of nomad who are kind of living between Cape Town, Nairobi, Mexico City, and really the world is their office and their home. So I then think about, okay, within these two segments, who's speaking with them? If I look at the first, right, around this kind of hybrid worker, companies, even someone like MEST, right? You guys have access to amazing founders around the world. Different incubators, different alumni associations will have access to those hybrid workers, companies that kind of employ these hybrid workers. Second one, champagne nomads, who's speaking with them? There's likely going to be some more kind of traditional influencers in that. So kind of travel influencers who people look at for tips and tricks and this aspirational lifestyle. So I would then look at, again, within those, what's something that could be beneficial to those two different potential influencers. So again, if I'm looking at like part one, these hybrid workers, say that I'm talking to a company who employs individuals who would be attracted to Yayem for those purposes. They might, likely those companies aren't going to necessarily want money, but for them, being able to offer this to say their top executives could be like a really great business perk. We find companies around the world are like, oh, great, we can offer Yayem to our top executives. We then know when they land anywhere, they have a supportive community, they're learning, and they have workspaces. Great. So now I know that with those potential influencers and brands, I can maybe offer them, discounted or free membership for their top executives. Great. If I look at the travel influencer, looking at this kind of champagne nomad segment, they might be excited about our trips. Right. So like, as an example, we have a trip to Oaxaca coming up. We're doing another one in Senegal, being able to offer them a free or discounted trip. Right. And the other thing to emphasize is like, it doesn't always have to be purely a money value. I think that in-kind trade is great. Uber was an easy one to do in-kind trade for. Yayem's a little bit more challenging. So I've had to think more critically. So I'd look at in-kind trade. And at the end of the day, I mean, it might be unpopular, but like if you're getting good growth, like you can also just look at cash sometimes. I mean, I hate cash. I think it's messy, but when you're in the early stages, if you know that someone, like a lot of these, a lot of people still do at the end of the day is want cash, right? So like if you can get, if you talk to someone and they're like, hey, listen, I love this brand, but really what I need is cash, and you can strike a deal in an authentic way. Like, again, this might be unpopular opinion, but like it can work. I would say in the beginning, just to reiterate that, it's define who your audience is, figure out who is talking to them in a meaningful way with trust, and then 3, figure out what they want and what motivates them.
All right, thank you very much, Lisa. I think we have a question in the chat box. Someone wants to find out what kind of content drives organic growth in your opinion.
Yeah, it's such a good question because it's so like with the changing algorithms on all these different platforms, it's really honestly challenging to drive that like to be really specific on what kind of content. I think that like anything that I'm gonna for this one, I'll give kind of a bit of a different type of answer, but also jump in if it doesn't fully answer your question. Highlighting, so if I look at social media, highlighting product features is just never going to break through the algorithm. So like you can do it, but no one wants to look at Instagram and see your product features, especially if you're not putting money behind it. You're just not going to get organic growth from that. And that's like a pretty, I would say I could say that with pretty much certainty. So highlighting product features without growth, without any paid behind it, on traditional channels, i.e. social media, you're not going to do well. I'd also say that over curated pieces of content without money behind it typically doesn't do well either. It's just really hard today, again, with so many people posting so much with money behind it. It's really hard to break through the noise. What I have seen works, and this is me looking again, like at social media specifically, is like wacky, weird things that people aren't going to expect. So like if I look at even, you guys are welcome to check out Yayem's Instagram. I'll put it here because you can kind of see things that we've been playing around with, and it's here on Instagram. It's so interesting because like we have so much variation. Some of our posts will get like 200 plus likes. Some of them will get like 2. And so you can kind of learn from that. What we've seen work is like wacky, weird things they wouldn't expect. Something that like if someone is scrolling through their feed, they're going to click on that. So like wacky, weird, reels, colorful things that just capture people's attention. Again, we're not putting any paid behind our Instagram. And so like we have learned what kind of works, what doesn't from an organic point of view. It's things you wouldn't expect, and it's things that are playful, lots of video and catches people's attention. Looking outside of social media from a content point of view, you can be really smart, and it's something that I really want to start focusing on now. I've just hired a head of engagement, so I'm going to be prioritizing this. There's a way to crack the system a bit on SEO. And if you could, that's like search engine optimization, if anyone doesn't know the term, but if you can anticipate what are people going to be Googling in order to like, what are things that people commonly Google, and you can bid on some words that are less popular, there's a way to really hack that in a smart way. So again, if I look at like Yayem as an example, we, likely it's going to be very expensive to own the space of like global nomad, but no one's really owning the space of like a tailor in Cape Town. Whereas I was just in Cape Town and I had a ton of members be like, hey, where can I find a good tailor? So like, again, we haven't experimented at this, but I kind of had this idea of like, well, what if we just like do an article on like boring shit to help you live the Yayem lifestyle in Cape Town. Like, and in that you have a note on the best tailor on Kloof Street, right? Again, we haven't tried this, but this is my brain thinking of like, maybe that's a great way to get organic growth without a lot of money because no one's bidding on tailor in Cape Town. So that's a bit of an answer to that on the organic content piece. I hope that's useful.
All right, thank you very much. We have a hands raised. Odafe, if you can unmute and ask a question.
Hi, good afternoon or good day. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. So my question is around being data focused. My question is around being data focused.
Okay.
So you're new startup, you're in a new market, you're reaching out to some customers. There are things that you're doing. How do you know what to track and not get bogged down in a bunch of different metrics that can be distracting and that gives you like insights and direction? So like what approach would you recommend for us in that situation? Thank you.
It's a really good question. And one that sounds simple, but I see so many people, myself included, who mess it up. I would probably look in the early days, it's all about growth and fast growth. Fast sustainable growth, I should say. I would look at like, what are the metrics for you that are really going to make that difference? And so like, try to boil it down to 2 or 3. So again, if I look at Uber, it was always rider signups, driver signups were the 2 biggest ones. Under that, there were obviously, supply hours, completed to request, efficiency. But at the end of the day, it was like rider signups and driver signups to start. And we decided that early on, that was the most important thing. As markets matured, engagement metrics became more critical. So the number of rides per user. And I see a question actually in the chat box around existing users. So we'll get to that afterwards. So I would really look at for where you're at a business, what's going to get you to that next phase of growth. So set up, be specific on what is that next phase of growth for you, and then decide what are one or two metrics that are going to get you there. I would say maximum number of metrics you're looking at should be 3. Otherwise, you're just going to get so bogged down. So again, if I look at Yayem, my biggest thing right now is membership growth above everything else. I'm fine if my experience is just break even. I'm not that concerned about revenue per member yet. I need membership growth. Even if it means deprioritizing things like churn, obviously a critical metric. But while I'm a team of 10 around 4 continents, I need to have one metric that everyone's focused on, and that's growth. So member growth. So I would really look at it like that, which is like, what are your targets that you have to hit that you set for yourself? And what are the metrics that are most critical, 1 to 3 that are going to get you there? Does that answer your question a bit?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Great. And then I see on the right in the chat with Uber, what are some strategies to drive referrals from your existing customer base? Free rides, discounted rides, cash back. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, honestly, people want free shit. It's the most simple thing. Like, it's not always like, you need to make sure that it's done in a sustainable way. I think if we can learn one thing actually from the Ubers and the ride sharing giants and the last minute grocery delivery and the scooters, it's that like, you need to also focus on a sustainable business, right? But if we're looking at it from a pure engagement point of view, free things do always work. It doesn't always mean that you're building a sustainable business. So it's a double-edged sword. But I would say that drive referrals, yeah, honestly, cash is the most effective way, and free things. Again, that said, just make sure that you're doing it in a way that's sustainable. Yes, Clement.
Oh, Clement, you can go ahead. Kindly unmute and ask a question. Clement, can you hear me? Can you hear us?
I think he can't.
Yeah, Clement, you have muted. You have unmuted, so you can.
It's
can go
okay.
ahead.
You can type the question here, Clement, and I'll read it out loud.
So whilst we wait on Clement, any more questions or comments or suggestions from anyone?
Well, I think Clement just wrote the quick question here. So what was the initial size of the Uber team? So Uber launched in each market with a team of 3, which was a community marketing manager who was very much responsible for getting the community excited, getting your initial riders, brand marketing, customer support, an operations manager whose primary job was onboarding drivers and managing the supply, and then a general manager who oversaw the operation. As Uber scaled, oftentimes these markets would operate with just marketing and operations, i.e. they didn't need that central GM started to do broader regions. So as an example, if I look now at Sub-Saharan Africa, we have 1 GM for Sub-Saharan Africa versus a GM for Cape Town when I joined. And then as the companies evolved as well, more and more of things have become centralized. But in the beginning, it was that very much a core team of 3 per city, GM, ops manager, and community manager. Which part of the business did you build first, drivers or riders?
Clement.
Yes.
So which part of the business did you build first? Is it the drivers or the riders?
So marketplaces are always a tricky balance. And I think that like there was never a day where it wasn't me yelling at my ops manager that we didn't have enough drivers, or him yelling at me that we didn't have enough riders. So if you're doing a marketplace business, whoever is managing the various sides will have a very special relationship. But traditionally speaking, supply will always drive demand. So that was how we looked at it at Uber. Again, that's an easier said than done. It's tricky, it's challenging, it's such a delicate balance. But that was how we looked at it traditionally. Supply would drive demand. And in most markets, you end up being it's more typical to be supply constrained. If you have a great product and it's well priced, the thinking is that the demand side will come.
Thank you. Any more questions from the team? Anyone with a question, comment, feedback, or to even contribute to the session?
How Uber arrived at its pricing model. Okay, so just to read it out loud, Clement has said, can you share some insights about how Uber arrived at its pricing model? Oof, pricing is such a hard one. I mean, it's so interesting. Like I always say this because I'm working on pricing on my new product that I've launched, and Uber spent so much money trying to do these like price elasticity studies. So we would look at, I mean, as you guys, as likely Uber users will have seen, right? We've gone through different pricing models in your market, and Uber spent millions of dollars on pricing analyses. And honestly, they taught us nothing new. So I think that pricing is, I would really look at it as like, get a core group of users and learn from them, right? So like price it in a way that obviously it can be sustainable for your business, but then really get input from your earliest users. Look at comp brands out there to understand how they're priced, and make a call. And I would say that you can always you can always bring your prices down. You can always raise your prices. Like it's always tricky pricing, honestly. I don't think Uber necessarily cracked it at all. Like I think actually if you look at Uber, one of the biggest challenges Uber's having today is that they priced it like unsustainably low in so many markets to get riders, and then as soon as they pulled back those incentives, you see drivers go offline. So I don't think Uber's cracked it at all. I think Uber wasted a lot of money, like I said, on these pricing strategies and hiring these fancy companies. I would really look at it as like, how can your business be sustainable? Like, what's a sustainable business model? Talk to your earliest users and look at how comparable brands have been priced out there in the market. I'm trying to figure it out even right now. Like literally before this call, our current global membership is priced at $500 US. I think it's too low. At the same time, I'm focused on, like I said before, user growth. So it's kind of this, I've personally just set some thresholds, which is like, okay, it's 500, which is at the lower end of the market. Once I hit X members, I'm going to increase it and then honor the pricing for my earliest users. So I don't think there's a one size fits all solution. And I don't think Uber cracked it. I would just say, like I said, look at comp brands, figure out what's going to actually build a business model that can sustain, and talk to your earliest users, and then test and experiment.
All right. Thank you very much, Lindsey. Any more questions, feedback, contributions? Anyone? Okay. So if we don't, Lindsey, any last words or comment from you?
No, I mean, really grateful for the time, guys. Like I said, I think I have so much respect for founders. It's a crazy time in the world these days. And I think that the companies and the founders that are getting through these cycles at a macro level are going to be the companies that are set up for long-term success. Like when I look at, again, like the different cycles in funding, and you can see just like the differences between a couple of years ago, ventures that were going out there versus what's happening today. Like it's objectively a challenging time. And so like immense respect for everyone, as well as, I feel you, I know what you guys are going through and learning every day. So really just like keep being positive. I think that it was easy to grow businesses when cash was cheap. It's harder now, but it also means that these businesses are going to be set up for success, I believe, far more in the long term. I think a lot of what we're seeing right now with bigger tech companies seeing huge hits has to do with the fact that cash was just so cheap, valuations were so high, and we're the group of founders who are going to build the businesses that are going to be lasting 10 years from now plus. And so immense respect, keep up the good work. Don't get down too much when you face challenges. We're all facing them. And I hope to meet you guys in person. And yes, best way to email me at my Yayem email, because it's really the only one I check. And also obviously happy to be, shoot me emails, happy to support in any way I can. And hopefully we launch I'm really hoping to launch my business in Accra in the next 6 to 9 months. So hopefully I get to meet a lot of you guys in person then.
Thank you, Lindsey. Before you go, Eugenie, you raised your hand. Did you have a question?
It wasn't really a question. So I just wanted to have like a more direct connect with you, because Henny, my company, is a bit more in your space, something that has to do with experiences and all. So I wanted to see if we can have some conversation and see if there's any possible partnership, especially as you're planning to expand to Ghana.
Yeah, for sure. Shoot me an email and we can grab time to connect.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Lindsey. I know you're a very busy person for taking time off your busy schedule to be with us. for sharing your knowledge, your insights, and your experience, and also your advice to our founders. We really appreciate it. And thank you once again. We really appreciate your time.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. And I hope to be in touch with all of you soon.
All right. Thank you.